Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I hope you had a great weekend. Let me start with Bitcoin, which had this extraordinary surge as high as 10,540. I follow a gentleman called FX Pip Titan, and his commentary is no changes. The game hasn't altered or morphed into something new. Bitcoin can dance all it wants, but down is the main trend direction. Currently at 9,405. A very nice spike, hitting a high of the day of 10,540, but no changes in the overall trend, which is down. And then he calls it a hard spike move, such as what is seen on your chart, has to be first considered to be a washout move. Why? Because the thrust up was too fast and too large, which automatically means price is going to rebalance for the next phase, leg up or leg down. And the proximate cause were comments from Xi Jinping, which the market took as extremely bullish, and we're currently, as I said, 9,400 and change, but this shows you how the markets can really play with you in a very cruel manner. I think, we could go higher, we could go as high as 15,000, but ultimately we're going down to 1,000, as I said previously. Home thoughts. I don't work for the money, dear. I work for art. Maria Callas. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Langston Hughes. All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream. Edgar Allan Poe. But I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams. W.B. Yeats. 1,000 dreams within me softly burn. From time to time my heart is like some oak, whose blood runs golden where a branch is torn. Arthur Rimbaud. The best way to make your dreams come true is to wake up. Paul Valery. And I've been recently reading a book named My Name Is Why by a gentleman called lemnsissay, whom I've been following for many years on social media. And his poetry is pithy, it's a little bit like E. Cummings. How do you do it? Said night. How do you wake and shine? I can keep it simple, said light, one day at a time. I tweeted Lem and I said, I finally got my copy of My Name Is Why. I came to you via your poetry, which after reading the book is a neat thing, and I look forward to meeting him in person. His book is about the time from when he was born and adopted to the time he was 18, and it's very powerful. But what I found interesting, obviously the care institutions of that era were horrible things, but he had quite a sensitive social worker who looked after him. Not one drop of my self-worth depends on your acceptance of me, Quincy Jones, via Surambaya. Political Reflections, my article over the weekend was called From Russia with Love. President Putin, whom I, amongst others, believe moved the needle sufficiently to put Trump into the White House, and whose assets range from Marine Le Pen to the Movimento 5 Stelle in Italy, and if there are barbarians at the gates of Fortress Europe, they do belong to Vladimir. His Syrian intervention on behalf of Bashar Assad has lasted 48 months so far, and the optics of US military vehicles departing in a hail of tomatoes and Russian military vehicles patrolling precisely the same area a few minutes later sums it up. Last week, Putin made his late cycle play for Africa, hosting a Russia-Africa summit in the Black Sea resort of Sochi. Late to the party, Russia's return to Africa, tweeted P. Stronsky. Putin, in an interview with state-run news service TASS, said, "Indeed, interest in developing the relations with African countries is currently visible not only on the part of Western Europe, the US and China, but also on the part of India, Turkey, the Gulf states, Japan, the Republic of Korea, Israel and Brazil. This is not accidental, as Africa increasingly becomes a continent of opportunities. These opportunities include natural resources, infrastructure development, and increasing consumer demand from a growing population," Putin specified. But he said Russia was going to be a different kind of superpower, one that does not engage in pressure, intimidation and blackmail to exploit sovereign African governments. Our Africa agenda is positive and future-oriented. We do not ally with someone against someone else, and we strongly oppose any geopolitical games involving Africa. Putin's linguistics are an art form, and I imagine he buttressed the above points by discreetly showing his visitors a photo of a dead Gaddafi, and maybe he dwelled a little on the bottle, and then a photo of a sprightly Bashar Assad, and would surely not even have had to ask the question, what's the difference? Between 2006 and 2018, Russia's trade with Africa increased by 335%, and more than both China's and India's, according to the Espresso Economist. Russia is now Africa's leading supplier of arms, according to the Swedish think tank SIPRI. Between 2012 and 2016, Russia had become the largest supplier of arms to Africa, accounting for 35% of arms exports to the region, way ahead of China's 17% and the United States 9.6% and France 6.9%. Exports of Russian-made weapons and military hardware to Africa amount currently to $4.6 billion annually, with a contract portfolio worth over $50 billion. Russian arms trade with Africa doubled compared with 2012. Russia is the world's largest wheat exporter and will surely ramp up its supplies of grain and fertilizer to meet demand that is rising in step with Africa's booming population. Russia's clout on African soil runs on many tracks, and its expansion is geared primarily towards hybrid activities. In Moscow's offer for Africa are mercenaries, military equipment, mining investments, nuclear power plants, and railway connections. Russia regards Africa as an important and active participant in the emerging polycentric architecture of the world order, and an ally in protecting international law against attempts to undermine it, said Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov back in November 2018. The spokesman for the Egyptian presidency gushed Russia has white hands in Africa. Recently, we have seen Russian interventions in the Central African Republic. In July this year, a 3-minute animated video appeared on YouTube called Lion Bear. The cartoon was aimed at children and told the story of a brave but beleaguered Central African lion who was fighting a losing battle against a pack of hungry hyenas. Luckily, the lion had a friend who came to the rescue, the strong Russian bear. The bear fights off the hyenas, brings peace to the land, and everyone lives happily ever after. The video was produced by Lobaye Invest, a Russian mining company, with links to the Wagner Group. Lobaye runs a radio station in the Central African Republic and organized a Miss CAR pageant. But as a CNN investigation reported this year, Lobaye also funds the 250 Russian mercenaries who are stationed in the country. The dividend for Lobaye Invest, generous concessions to explore for diamonds and gold in a country rich in mineral wealth, it reported. Russian mercenaries are officially there to train the CAR's national army, but their activities in the country are shrouded in secrecy. And when 3 Russian journalists travelled there to investigate, they were murdered. That came from the Mail and Guardian, Simon Allison. I would argue Putin's timing is exquisite and optimal, and his model has an exponential ROI. The Warsaw Institute headlined its article, Russia and Africa Weapons, Mercenaries, Spin Doctors, Russia's clout on African soil runs on many tracks, and its expansion is geared primarily towards hybrid activities. In Moscow's offer for Africa are mercenaries, military equipment, mining investments, nuclear power plants, and railway connections. Andrew Korybiko writes, Moscow invaluably fills the much-needed niche of providing its partners there with democratic security, or in other words, the cost-effective and low-commitment capabilities needed to thwart colour revolutions and resolve unconventional wars, collectively referred to as hybrid war. To simplify, Russia's political technologists have reportedly devised bespoke solutions for confronting incipient and ongoing colour revolutions, just like its private military contractors, PMCs, have supposedly done the same when it comes to ending insurgencies. Once we look through the optics of 2 nuclear-capable supersonic bombers belonging to the Russian Air Force landing in Pretoria for the aircraft's first ever landing on the African continent, and according to an embassy official, only the second country in which it has made a public appearance outside of Russia, the first was Venezuela, then we need to see this move for what it is. It is meaningful. Where Xi is fed up and speaks about the end of vanity because the ROI outside commodities and telecoms for China is negative, Putin has created a hybrid model with an exponential ROI. I would imagine he's on speed dial. The bombers have landed, B-1s arrive in Saudi Arabia as part of US build-up. Deployments are short, they're crisp, they're not long and enduring. And that's something that's really important for everybody to understand. There are no ally bombers. This is the one thing we do better than anybody else. Here you see a US armored vehicle passing in front of a giant poster of President Assad in Hasakah. The poster reads, presented by the political security branch in Hasakah. Moving on, this photo was released by the White House showing the President, the Vice President, Mike Esper, the Defense Secretary, along with members of the National Security Team, in the Situation Room watching as US Special Operations Forces close in on IS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Al-Baghdadi is a nom de guerre. He had various names and epithets, including Abu Dua, Al-Shabaab, the Phantom or Ghost, Amir al-Mumin, Caliph. And then I came across this. As far as we know, this man was already dead, maybe twice. He reportedly faked his death once as well. From a domestic point of view, the purpose of the attack is fairly obvious. Donald Trump has an election coming up, and potential presidents like nothing more than seeing to be tough. That means taking out some bad guys. Of course, none of that matters. It doesn't matter what happened. It doesn't matter why it happened. And it doesn't matter whether who it allegedly happened to was real or alive or otherwise. Because as always, the problem is not the specifics. It's the principle and the precedent. Ian Cox tweeted, I kept saying, where's Waldo? Pity our Conservative MPs forced to go on strike to protect their way of life is a great article in The Guardian by Marina Hyde. It was the worst of times. It was the worst of times. On the one hand, inflatable reservist Marc Francois MP had previously promised that we will leave the EU on 31st October or this country will explode. On the other hand, Devon-based extremist Katie Hopkins had previously tweeted that we will leave the EU on 31st of October or I will drink a pot of tea naked in the Apprentice Losers Cafe with Farage's face on each nipple. We will not be leaving the EU on the 31st of October. Instead, we're waiting to see whether the French will give us an election. The Prime Minister wants a Christmas election, but at present that old Scrooge Jeremy Corbyn won't give him one. We are triggering Operation Yellowhammer, he announced on Sunday. You're triggering us all, dear Michael Gove. And what if they can't get an election? Then, like a lot of other comedy shows, the Conservative government has decided to have a strike episode. South Park did one once, where the nation of Canada goes on strike because it feels disrespected by the world. The answer lies with Sir Percy Blakeney. He honked on that novel's hero. They seek it here, they seek it there. Those parliamentarians seek it everywhere. Is it in heaven or is it in hell? That damned elusive Brexit bill. Yes, here we are in the same place. The October surprise is that there is no surprise. There are mayflies that survive longer than Cummings briefings, which now have a 4-hour lifespan, yet somehow always achieve their destiny. It's a really hilarious article. You must read it in full. Boris Johnson, I wrote about it on the 5th of August. I quoted the Telegraph's Daniel J. Hannan isn't bluffing. Every action, every appointment, every word since he entered 10 Downing Street signals the same thing. Britain is leaving the EU on October 31st. They're not. Just look at the headlines in This Is the Weekend FT, hardly the bastion of left-wing politics, even if they're highlighting the danger to workers' rights from Johnson's Brexit. You've got to watch this Frontline PBS, which is a tremendous resource, Zero Tolerance, the full film. This is all about the immigration policy and the players, and it gives you a deep insight into situations which you will recall from the news. Let's move on to currency markets. Euro dollar 110.92. Dollar index 97.809, Japanese yen 108.73, Swiss franc 0.9951, the pound 128.21, the Australian dollar 0.6820, India rupee 70.845, South Korean won 1170.295, Brazilian real for the figure, Egyptian pound 16.1417, and the rand 14.60. Dollar index was last at 97.809, but we have a rate cut coming up this week. Euro dollar, this is from FX Pip Titan, and we're currently trying to move higher, 110.91. Sterling, currently 128.25. I, for one, think we're going to drop below 128. I have to commend Tesla's Elon Musk for teaching the world about what a short squeeze really looks and feels like. Have a look at this chart. It's like a SpaceX launch. That took me back to the parabola. It is a curve. Each of them feels unmistakably it is the parabola. They must have guessed once or twice, guessed and refused to believe that everything always collectively had been moving toward that purified shape latent in the sky, that shape of no surprise, no second chance, no return. Tesla chart looks like a SpaceX launch, $327 last. Had you bought $300 calls for 27 cents last week, they're now worth $27. This is another chart from Aaron Klein 10x. And I think Tesla's responsible for the most shorted basket squeezing and taking out the negative trend, and that's from the market ear. Neumann, the founder of WeWork, will walk away from this corporate bonfire with $1 billion and a bunch of fancy houses. Obviously, there will be a Harvard Business School case study about WeWork, but what will it say? What is the lesson? It's a good lesson, right? A lot of kids starting at Harvard Business School next fall will be hanging up posters of Adam Neumann in their dorm rooms. Neumann, the founder of WeWork, will walk away from this corporate bonfire with $1 billion and a bunch of fancy houses, created a company that destroyed value at a blistering pace, and nonetheless extracted $1 billion for himself. He lit $10 billion of SoftBank's money on fire and then went back to them and demanded a 10% commission. What an absolute legend. Neumann has told others that Mr. Sun appreciated how he was crazy, but thought that he needed to be crazier. I like to imagine the conversation with the hindsight of the last few months. Neumann, did I mention we're in a state of consciousness, a generation of interconnected, emotionally intelligent entrepreneurs? You're crazy, I love it. But could you be, say, 10 times crazier? Neumann, you're going to invest $10 billion in my company, which I will use as kindling to light the whole edifice on fire. And then when we're both standing in the ashes, you will pay me another $1 billion to walk away while I laugh at you. That's $9.5 billion that SoftBank is putting into WeWork on top of the more than $9 billion it has already put into WeWork, an astounding total for more than $18.5 billion for a company it values at $8 billion. This is not money that's going to keep WeWork afloat. This is just cashing out other investors to leave SoftBank holding more of the bag. The bailout will give SoftBank about 80% ownership, presumably, though who knows. SoftBank does not have limitless money to pour into WeWork, so it's strange that such a big chunk of its WeWork rescue investment is not going to fund the company. Perhaps the motivation is that SoftBank are true believers and don't want their deep value bet on WeWork to be diluted by other shareholders. But my assumption is that the tender offer is the result of Neumann's hold-up power. Prior to the deal, Neumann is still the company's controlling shareholder, and he could just say no to a deal that he didn't like. This might completely evaporate his own wealth, but it would evaporate a whole lot more of SoftBank's, and it kind of looks like SoftBank blinked first. In effect, the price of Neumann allowing SoftBank to rescue WeWork was that SoftBank had to hand Neumann $1 billion for himself. One version of that Sun-Neumann origin myth has Son telling Neumann that in a fight, being crazy is better than being smart. You can see a little of that in this negotiating dynamic. As his company value vanished due to his own hubris and weirdness, Neumann went back to his biggest investor for more desperately needed money, and somehow he held all the cards. So it's an extraordinary story, well worth reading in full, and a very good analysis in Bloomberg. Commodity markets, gold last trading at $15, 1504.75. We've popped back below that key 1500 level. Crude oil last at $56.50. We've had a good run in crude oil. I'm beginning to think we'll sort of short term, it's a bit of a sell. Emerging markets, the MSCI World Total Return Index has reached a new all-time high, both in dollars and euros. That's from JS Blockland. Fernandez, whose win puts a left-wing political movement known as Peronism back into national power in Argentina, and immediately Argentina's central bank tightened limits on dollar purchases, limiting dollar purchases for individuals to $200 a month, down from $10,000. Dubai needs to halt all new home construction for 1 or 2 years to avert an economic disaster brought on by continued oversupply. We're entering a crossroads now, said Damat Properties chairman Hussein Sajwani in a Bloomberg interview. Either we fix this problem and we can grow from here, or we're going to see a disaster. All we need is just to freeze the supply, he said, reduce it for a year, maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years. He's blaming EMA. Pointed at his competitor EMA as the main culprit in the oversupply and said the company offers payment plans that encourage speculation. Sub-Saharan Africa, staying with Russia and Africa, Mail and Jardine, Simon Allison, soft power comes with hard edges. Talking about the aircraft's first ever landing on the African continent. Previously it had landed in Venezuela. This is the Tu-160, saying that Putin is making an audacious play for influence on the continent by portraying Russia as an enlightened partner for Africa. Our Africa agenda is positive and future-oriented. We do not ally with someone against someone else. We strongly oppose any geopolitical games, including Africa. And here's a photograph of the Russian Air Force Tupolev Tu-160 Blackjack. One way to look at this is as a referendum on Emmerson Mnangagwa's rule so far, with SADC's endorsement, and people voted with their feet. They kept them at home, an epic disaster. No one is turning up unless they're ordered to at any function he's holding. It's a debacle. Those earning RTGS bonds in dollars have seen their real wages fall to 5% of what they were a year ago. And as I wrote previously in January, money is the most universal and most efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. That was Yuval Noah. And there is no trust. The mind game that ZANU-PF played on its citizens has evaporated in a puff of smoke. Voodoo economics, I called it. And I also said there is a correlation between high inflation and revolutionary conditions, and that Zimbabwe is a classic example. Angola, where did all the money go? The Africa report. No one is so rich and powerful that they cannot be punished, and no one is so poor that they cannot be protected, the president told the crowd. Lourenço, with all the things he started doing, including putting some of the Dos Santos government in jail, is significant, have a liberating impact on Angolan society. Suddenly there was a guy coming from the MPLA giving a totally different speech. For the next 3 years, economic growth per head and oil production will shrink, according to forecasts from the IMF and the Economist Intelligence Unit. It won't be that easy. The government should publish details of every check it writes, every contract it signs. The people own the assets. They should have the information. This is the only way anything would change. The inner core made more than $1 billion each, maybe 20 people where they're worth way more than we can imagine. The inner core are like the Rockefellers, and the outer core are those and their kids who will never have to work it again. When the economy was growing at 25%, the elite was making money everywhere. Finally, you have to go through all the hoops. The reforms are so modest. They're about keeping the ship afloat rather than changing the course of navigation. This is why we hear Lourenço so angry about the Chinese loans contracted between 2014 and 2017. Their sheer volume and the amount of oil that has been mortgaged, short maturities, high interest rates are putting Angola's treasury under huge pressure to find the FX to service the debt. It has also shifted the power balance decisively in favor of China. Mozambique's incumbent President Filipe Nyusi has won a landslide victory, securing 73% of the vote. Of 17 economists surveyed in a Bloomberg survey, 9 forecast that Moody's will change its outlook on South Africa's credit rating to negative before the end of the year. The South African oil share is plus 4.56 in 2019. Dollar rand getting closer to key resistance at 1450. Egyptian pound 16.1178. EGX 30 plus 9.22% year to date. Nigerian all-share down 16.17% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 13.76% year to date. Russian Railways, DR Congo, to discuss possible $500 million rail deal. A memorandum of cooperation with the DR Congo to help rehabilitate its decrepit rail system. This is what I mean about this exponential ROI. You're better off doing that than a multi-billion dollar railway, which is what the Chinese have been doing. Tanzania's Q2 GDP growth rises to 7.2% versus 6.1%. That's the Statistics Bureau, but we can't verify that anymore. They're saying construction, mining and communications. Kenya banks on Lamu Port to gain regional shipping hub status. Kenya is betting on the multi-billion shilling Lamu Port to upset the power balance along East Africa's coast, setting Nairobi up for a battle with the port of Djibouti and the planned Bagamoyo harbour in Tanzania. First berth, $320 million Lamu Port is set for official opening next month. Djibouti controls transshipment business in the region. Lamu will play host to the newest port on the East African coast. The Lamu Port will begin its operations initially as a transshipment hub for global shipping lines. It will be supported by a special economic zone that is expected to attract investors from across the world to undertake various economic activities. Our aim is to make Lamu Port the port of choice for the export of Kenya's crude oil. We intend to make Lamu a transshipment hub for the East African region and the larger Horn of Africa. Currently, our Kilindini port cannot handle a Suezmax, a Neo-Panamax or Chinamax class vessels because of its shallow depths. Djibouti, with its two ports of Lobaye and the port of Djibouti, currently handles the largest cargo volumes in the region, averaging 3 million tons annually. Cargo coming into the region from China, currently East Africa's biggest import source, docks at Singapore and is then offloaded to smaller ships en route to Mombasa. Those coming from Europe dock at Oman's Salalah port before they are shipped to the region. I've written about this Indian Ocean economy in a port race, I said today, from Massawa, Eritrea, admittedly on the Red Sea, to Djibouti, from Berbera to Mogadishu, from Lamu to Mombasa to Tanga to Bagamoyo, through Beira and Maputo all the way to Durban. And all points in between we're witnessing a port race of sorts as everyone seeks to get a piece of the Indian Ocean port action. China, the BRI initiative, the Gulf countries who now appear to see the Horn of Africa as the hinterland, Japan and India to a lesser degree, are all jostling for optimal geo-economic positioning. I also said in 2013, I have no doubt that the Indian Ocean is set to regain its glory days. I quoted Professor Filipe Nyusi, who said the precocity of the Indian Ocean as a zone of long-range navigation and cultural exchange is one of the glaring facts of history, made possible by the reversible escalator of the monsoon. This is a photograph I took of the setting sun in Lamu the last time we visited. It reminded me of that quote of Roberto Bolano, "The sky at sunset looked like a carnivorous flower." Kenya's debt jumps to 6 trillion shillings. It has grown by 14% in the first 8 months of 2019, according to MIA. Current reported debt would be over 60% of GDP in 2019, effectively 7.8 trillion if you include already budgeted borrowing, said Mohammed Wellier. The Competition Authority of Kenya gave Nigeria's biggest lender, Access Bank, the go-ahead to acquire 93.57% of the transnational bank. Eurobonds. For the 2018 issue, the yield on the 10-year declined to 6.4% and the 30-year Eurobond yield remained unchanged at 7.9%. 2019 issue yield on 7-year Eurobond remained unchanged at 6.3%. The 12-year Eurobond is at 7.2%. The yield on 91, 182 and 364-day T-bills is at 6.4%. 7.2% and 9.8%. Kenya's FX reserves increased by $19 million to $8.944 billion in the week ended 24th of October. Monthly remittances have remained above $200 million in 21 of the last 22 months, including after the tax amnesty deadline of June 2019, where they surged to almost $300 million. The market is trading at a PE ratio of 11.4. Nairobi all shares up 7.02%. The NSE 20 is down 12.014%. Kenya's second largest city becomes world's new drug trafficking hub is a documentary on France 24. And Goldman Sachs becomes the largest institutional investor in Twiga Foods after acquiring a stake in the startup's latest fundraising round, amounting to $23.75 million. Thank you for stopping by.